Hi, I'm Rainer. I am part of the brand activation studio in Kaspersky, and what we do is we produce content that is, in an entertaining way, trying to make people understand what cybersecurity is about. My main task is working on a platform called Tomorrow Unlocked, and Tomorrow Unlocked is a digital magazine for cyber culture, and in majority we are producing documentaries which are trying to make the viewer understand how cybercrime works these days. I've been a PR person all my career, and relatively clearly the word already says public relation, it doesn't say media relations. And I've left the PR team for doing this job with Tomorrow Unlocked now. But it doesn't mean that I don't think I'm not a PR person anymore. I think PR, like every other discipline in marketing, needs to develop on a constant basis. And what we are trying to do is to show a few new ways of how we could do PR. Would we maybe in a few years seriously see Netflix and Amazon Prime as a PR channel? Then, well, we'd have to see that companies are set up in a way that they can produce content that is interesting enough for someone to watch on these channels. And that's why I think what we are doing in Tomorrow Unlocked is PR. And for sure, a press release or a press event are very, very important tools. And media still have an enormous reach, but how will the media landscape change? How many people under 30 these days are on a regular basis reading a newspaper? But everybody is using streaming services. So I think we need to get ready to, as PR people or as communications people, to use platforms like Netflix as a PR platform. And as my first boss once told me, PR is what you don't have to pay for. So obviously we need what we want to do really is we want to try to create content that is so good, so unique, that a TV station or a streaming platform would actually want it from us, and not that we would have to beg and pay money. Well, I mean, the message we deliver is basically that cybercrime and cybersecurity is relevant for everybody, and the target we have with that is that we are trying to make people get in touch with cybersecurity for the first time in an entertaining way, and with our brand for sure in the end. The idea behind that is that we believe that too many people currently do not care about cybersecurity. If people don't care about cybersecurity, obviously, they would not get interested in it, and they would leave their computers unprotected. Unprotected computers are an issue for several reasons, so we want to change that. But we understand that we cannot go into the market and speak to people who have never been in touch with anything cybersecurity related about technical details. So where we are starting is basically by entertaining people and telling them really interesting crime stories in the end about cybercrime. Interpol, in an interview with us the other week, told us that today 50-50, there's a ratio of 50-50 between cybercrime and real crime. That means if you look at entertainment, most of the crime stories currently are about real crime. Very little are about cybercrime, but the reality is different, and that's what we are trying to help to change. Yeah, when it comes to work cultures, funnily, all three countries that I've worked in had certain similarities and massive differences. I think one big difference between Russia and Germany versus the UK, for example, is Communications culture. So Germans and Russians, both alike, are in the UK often considered a bit rude because we might want to say things very directly, what is not too popular in the UK. So in that way, there are strong similarities between Russia and Germany, for example. When it comes to work-life balance, on the other hand, for example, the UK, I think, is much closer to Germany, where people would keep their working hours relatively straight. So remember, in the German office, you could set your watch after when the back office were leaving the office. It was 5 sharp. Every day was absolutely clear. When they were leaving, it was 5. While in Russia, when I was getting up from my desk at 7 or 7:30 in the evening, everybody was still there. For sure, there's also partly the element that we are an international company and there's a time zone element. People come later and leave later. But also, I mean, in Germany, if I would have to call a colleague on the weekend to discuss something, it would be a super extraordinary thing. While in Russia, nobody would even hesitate for a second to call someone to discuss something about work when they think it is important on the weekend. So I think there are strong difference when it comes to that. My feeling was that in Russia, work was much more important than it is here in Germany, for example. While the UK was a bit more like Germany in these terms. But funnily and luckily, it was relatively easy to get used to the cultures. It's not a huge different work culture, for sure. I was in the same company at the same time. So companies make a part of the work culture, and then the country makes a part of the work culture. But all in all, it was easy to get along with all of them. Maybe sometimes it's even a bit easier for me as a German to get along with Russians, because I know that they would tell me straight in the face if they don't like something, than with Anglo-Saxon people. For me, from a work-life balance perspective, both London and Germany were really good. In London, I could just go kayaking at the Olympic kayak track in the evening or on the weekend. So that was how I spent most of my free time, and that was quite comfy. It also gave me a super balance compared to what I did at work. So I was sitting in a boat, I was active, I couldn't think about anything else. While I also worked a lot, but there was something that was balancing it out. In Germany, well, you see me sitting in my garden right now. I have everything I need to balance. If I feel like I need a break, I'll take off my shoes and walk through the garden bare feet or something like that. That is relatively easy. I'm living on the countryside, so maintaining balance here is simple because everything I need is just a step away. It was quite difficult in Moscow. I think it's also a question of also a question of the city. To me, Moscow always felt, my whole 3 years in Moscow, like it's never taken a break. Work isn't taking a break, the city isn't taking a break, nothing is taking a break. And that was maybe the most difficult from a work-life balance perspective also, because if you would want to go out on the countryside, it could take you 3 hours through traffic jam. So that was usually not an option. On the other hand, from a work social life balance, Moscow was great. So many bars, restaurants, so many options. But yeah, I think simply because I'm living on the countryside in Germany, it's much easier to hold the balance here. If you look at similarities language-wise, actually, it sounds weird, but it is so. Russian and German have quite a number of similarities, not only words, but also how things are being said. My wife is Russian, so we obviously we find such things out from time to time, that might be an international expression, but it just came up last week. Liebe geht durch den Magen in German means love goes through your stomach, and there's a very similar expression in Russian. So the way we are saying things often are quite similar. Also, there is an enormous amount of German words in Russian language, like Schlagbaum or Rucksack or Marschroute. So there are lots of German words that are easy for me to understand. And I think a classic thing where my wife and I are using Russian or German words instead of English, although we're speaking English all the time, is, for example, parsley. Parsley is Petersilie in German, and it's Petrushka in Russian, and it's parsley in English. So parsley is that one word that makes least sense to us, while the other two words somehow make sense in the other language. So yeah, you see such similarities. On the other hand, when you work in the UK, for sure, so much of our work language is English anyway. So communicating for work often is much easier in English. Work-wise, it has changed very little. I was in home office before. I'm still sitting at my home office desk every day as I would have done before. What it changed a lot, on the other hand, is how we do our work. I mean, I'm producing films mainly, and shooting films during the pandemic has become, well, increasingly difficult. And so we had to come up with new approaches how we would shoot films. Like we are now shooting this interview, for example, on a GoPro, which is not an unusual thing to do. And during the pandemic, we bought a number of GoPros with microphones and tripods and an end, and we will put them in a package and send them to someone so they could film themselves. That is not ideal, because often you don't get the perfect picture and you don't get the perfect sound, but you get something. You get something that is better than not being able to produce. It for sure demands something from the counterpart, so they would have to play with you there, but it works. For shooting a documentary that we're currently working on that is actually about hacking in the pandemic, we were shooting at Interpol, and Interpol is closed currently. All their offices are closed. Nobody can get in, so we couldn't get in. We could not even send a camera team, a local camera team in Singapore. So what we did was, again, we bought a camera and a tripod and lighting and microphones, and had a colleague bring it to Interpol. A PR person from Interpol picked it up, and then we filmed with that. Now the director and the director of photography that we were working with, oh yeah, they would be really nervous about that, because they can't see the picture, they don't know what's going on. That is a really difficult thing for them. But for getting a result, it was the only way that we could work these days. And I mean, you have to film somehow in the end. And in this case, we get a film in a good quality, maybe not in the best quality we could, but we can still continue producing content. And that is really difficult. I see lots of filmmakers currently struggling, and if you just listen to announcements about the movie industry, how they were postponing films and stuff, we found a solution and it worked. But we had two directors for our current documentary series that we are working on. And one of them was super easy. She was like, yeah, that's amazing, let's try that, it's so interesting, trying something completely different. And the other one was like, yeah, no, I really don't want to do that, but if you force me, okay, maybe. So it's getting more difficult. You can't travel to places, so you would have to do lots of stuff remotely. You would have to put a phone on front of the camera and then have the director call in on a WhatsApp call so that it looks like the person is speaking to someone directly. It was a creative time, I found, interesting time. Now the lockdowns are not that strict anymore. It's getting easier for us to film, but it's still, it's still a challenge for sure. Will we use some of these techniques in the future? Yeah, we might. I think this sending a GoPro to someone to shoot an interview is actually something that we could use in the future. It's a relatively cheap way of producing. It's a bit unpredictable, and we've just published a film that was shot like that, and you can definitely see it in the image quality, in the video quality. It's not perfect, but it works somehow. And I think, yes, not every film that we would be publishing on YouTube has to be shot in a cinematic mega quality. And I think for directors and in general for productions, it might actually help get production costs down if you continue working in a remote way without having the whole team fly somewhere. So I think some of these learnings will definitely be applied in the future. Second part of a challenge that we for sure had in the pandemic was, how do we get content? And at the beginning, when the first lockdowns came, definitely everyone was locked up and there was no way doing anything. We couldn't even have sent a local team. And at that time we were discussing what could we do that at the same time has a community aspect, so maybe helps filmmakers and helps us. And somehow a filmmaker of ours got stranded in Bali in a house with lots of creative people. And I discussed it with them, and together we came up with the idea of a film contest we called 12 in the end, where we put out a solid prize money, I think, to help filmmakers. And we asked them to shoot in the same hour on the same day everywhere on the planet, and then cut this down into a 1-minute film. And the 12 best were awarded, and for sure we had a winner in the end. The idea behind it was to really capture an hour in the pandemic, and we actually think, yeah, that worked. It worked pretty well. We saw beautiful films. We had, I think, 300 submissions in total. We had 3,000 people signing up for the contest, of which then 10% handed in a film. I think that was good. It was really interesting, and to see how people were approaching this, how they were showing us moments of their life in the pandemic, really straight. You could look into their living rooms. A couple was performing a wedding ceremony at that time, because that would have been their wedding day, and they made a film out of that and such things. It was really, really beautiful. And the feedback from the community, from the filmmaking community, was very good. I've never seen people come back in a contest so much thanking us and saying, it's so great, thanks for this contest, so I have something to do, I have a challenge. So this was really interesting. It was really maybe one of the nicest campaigns, you could say, that I've ever done. How do I stay creative is a question that people consider me a creative person, so I get this question quite often. And it's very difficult because creativity feels different for different people. I've heard a brain researcher once say, who focuses on creativity, that creativity simply means that certain things that you combine sound logical to you while they sound not logical to others. So this point and this point is far away for one person, and it's right next to each other for someone else. And so in that way, it's very difficult to teach creativity to someone. But I think things you need for creativity are other people. It's very important. You need to have other people around you that you can discuss with and develop ideas. Usually the first idea isn't good, but in a discussion then something would come up. Don't take things too serious. A really stupid idea could in the end actually be the idea that really is it, if someone sits down and develops it. And you need time. There's a reason why many people say they have their best ideas under the shower or on the toilet or whatever. It is because when they have no stress, they are relieved, they are easy, they are sitting down and relaxing. So when I'm feeling like I have a block of some kind, writer's block, creative block, or whatever it would be, I would go into the garden and I would just walk around a bit, maybe take off the shoes, get my mind and my body out of work feeling and work environment. And that helps me. And now, especially in these days when I can't really have a team around me to discuss with, then it really often is helpful to simply completely shut work off and make my body understand that now it's getting a break. And then the ideas flow again. If you need to take a shower to have ideas, take a shower. I mean, it's bad for in a brainstorming, but it works definitely. And then I think a difference between people who are considered creative and people who are considered less creative often maybe also is that introvert people may be as creative as extroverts, but they would not speak up in a meeting or in a brainstorm or so. It's very important when you try to be creative and you have a team around you to force people to speak up. That's not always pleasant for people around, but everybody needs to be given a chance, and sometimes creativity lies in the easiest things. So yeah, I really think having time and getting your head off your everyday duties is the most important, and everybody would find their own way to do that. If you need to walk over in the other room and play Xbox for an hour to get your mind off work, then do that.